What we're going to talk about is HR skills of the future and how to develop them. In our work at Insight222, we're working with people analytics leaders in North America and in Europe, and I would say probably the most common thing that they ask us about and challenge that they talk about is upskilling the rest of HR to be more data-driven and more digital. So it'll be interesting when we talk through the panel now whether those skills come up. I have a sense that they might. We've got a great panel here. We've got three people who have all been practitioners, leaders within big organizations at different times, but they're now all doing something different. So RJ Milnor, who is on the far right, is the Global Head of People Analytics at Uber and previously held similar roles at McKesson and Chevron. And the first thing that struck me when I met RJ is the amount of work that he'd put into developing a community of practice at Chevron, which he then did at McKesson as well, all to try and help people both within the people analytics field and adjacent to it to actually become more familiar and more literate with this. So lots of stuff from RJ. Heather Whiteman, who is now Senior Lecturer at UC Berkeley. She teaches a course in people analytics, and we will definitely ask you about that. And previous to that, Heather was Head of People Analytics, Head of People Strategy, and a number of other stuff at GE Digital. And when she went to GE Digital, there were 200 people, and by the time you left, there were 26,000. So, and you did it mostly on your own from a people analytics perspective for a long time. And then Ian Bailie, my colleague at Insight222, but he's also the creator and leader of the myHRfuture platform, and previously at Cisco, where again you had a variety of roles around people planning, talent acquisition operations, but also helped develop a tool within Cisco to help career pathing and HR professionals to develop the skills that Cisco needed in the future, but also the wider Cisco population as well. So we've got a great panel here to talk through the skills of the future. So we're going to start with you, Heather, as you've moved into academia, and to get your view with people coming to the courses that you're doing at Berkeley. You know, it'd be great to understand if some of these are people currently in HR. What are the skills that they're wanting to learn?
Yeah, so I teach a couple different courses, but one that I've been teaching for a number of years is a course that tends to bring in people from the HR field that are only just now realizing how important people analytics and analytics in HR is. And one thing about the field is I make the joke often that a lot of times individuals in HR ended up there specifically because it was one of the few careers that required no data skills whatsoever to get. And then all of a sudden the world changed around them. And so I'm finding that, especially in the world of HR, we're seeing this awakening to the importance and the need for having data skills, but even more than doing the data itself, it's becoming a data translator. So a lot of what I focus on when I am, trying to educate is not just how to do data, but more importantly, even if you're not the one doing data, how do you understand it? How do you apply it? And beyond all that, how do you think critically about turning business problems into a question that can be answered and then solved by applying analytical thinking and analytical insights? So much of the skills that we focus on there is how to become that data translator and the person who can connect the power of data with what we know and what we do in HR.
That's great, thanks. And RJ, from looking from the organizations that you work with, I know you've only recently joined Uber, but typically, as a people analytics leader, what are the skills that you found was almost a barrier to enabling you to be more successful at Chevron or McKesson in particular?
So I think Heather really has it right when we talk about a data translator, a data interpreter. Those kinds of consulting skills of how do we take the insight and then make it understandable and then actionable are probably the biggest accelerators. And I think there's some great work from Deloitte and others that talk about that, but also the biggest barriers. So when we think about scaling people analytics and scaling insights across an organization, whether it's a smaller organization or a very large organization, having that data mindset is critical. And I think the question then becomes, how do you build a data mindset? So within a people analytics organization, certainly having the deep skills, so the core analytics skills that are developing the insights are critical, but you need those data translator skills to bring it out to the business. But it's not a one-way street. On the other side, in our HR business partner community, certainly in the business side, we also need the analytical thinking skills. So some of the work that we did in past organizations and we continue to do now are building those analytical thinking skills, whether it's among HR business partners or large HR community. And you can think about that in terms of a business mindset, but also a data mindset. And one of the things that I often talk about with HR peers is that we don't want business partners to be analysts, right? So I don't want people running structural equation models and doing that kind of thing in the field. What I do really want is a strong base of analytical thinking. So what's the problem? Clearly identifying the problem statement, breaking it down in terms of root cause, and then coming to the team with a clear understanding of, well, I think this is the problem. I think this might be what's driving it. Here's some data sources I'd like to explore. And it creates a much stronger partnership between the analytics teams, the HR teams, whether it's COEs or HR business partners and the business leaders in the field, and also allows us to interpret the insights much more quickly. And so you mentioned COEs, David. When we think about building COEs or communities of practice, really building the analytical thinking skills in the HR community, not just the hardcore analyst skills.
And I think that can be a challenge in some of the press that we see. It's that everyone in HR suddenly needs to become a data scientist. And as you said, that's not the case. They just need to be able to interpret and, as you said, do the framing the business problems and developing the hypothesis that the analytics team can then go away and investigate. And prioritizing the most important things, of course, as well.
Absolutely.
Okay. And Ian, slightly wider than people analytics, obviously, we did some work last year at myHRfuture, and we actually did a study of HR professionals around the skills that they wanted to learn. And it'd be great if you walk through some of those.
Yeah, so we ran some research just over a year ago where we went out and said, well, what did HR professionals feel like the skills they wanted to learn? Where did they feel they had the biggest knowledge gaps when you think about traditionally where HR has come from and where aspirationally they wanted to get to? And we saw there were 6 skills that came out as the priorities. People analytics, not surprisingly, was one. But we also saw topics like strategic workforce planning, digital HR and HR technology, and design thinking in HR come out as really high on the list as ones they wanted to learn. But then also we saw some softer skills like consulting and influencing and stakeholder management come out as well. And I think picking up on what you've both just said, that was really reassuring to me, because I think whilst there are newer skills and analytics historically has not been part of the core kind of skill set, there are newer skills that people need to learn, and we need to kind of confront the way that every organization is becoming more digital. But to do that, you need to influence, you need to persuade, you need to be able to really drive change, and you need to build credibility. If you're going to get success with your people analytics project, or if you're going to get budget for that cool new tool from next door that you want to implement, then you need to be able to really kind of build that influence and build credibility and get that through the line with all of those stakeholders. And we're seeing now that there's more stakeholders than ever to manage as well. And so it's been an interesting journey on understanding that blend of skills that I think are going to be really critical for HR in the future.
And these skills, of course, are very different, as I think all of you have alluded to what we've traditionally hired for in HR. So what are some of the blockers that actually prevent some of our colleagues, particularly HR business partners, to acquire these new skills easily? Ian, maybe you went last time. I'll let you go first this time.
Well, I'll go one, and then I'll hand over. So one thing that we're hearing a lot of as well is, sure, there's a piece around capability, right? So there are new skills and there is new knowledge that people want to acquire. But with that, also the topic of confidence, I think, is really important. And then also a theme of culture. And so how do you drive a culture within an organization where it's more data-driven or digital? How do you shift that? And that starts at the absolute top, right? If you're not seeing that being set by the senior leaders, then really you're not going to see that change come through. You're not going to see people start to decide that they want to learn the new skills and to change. But then allowing people to make mistakes, allowing people to actually practice these new skills and build that confidence as well, I think is really important, right? It's not just about taking a training course and you're done, right? You need to then apply those learnings, and you need to practice that time and time again to get the confidence to actually have a data-driven conversation with a senior leader, for example. And I think that's a really critical piece as well. And so I see those as a couple of the blockers that people need to overcome.
And RJ as well, any other additional blockers you've seen? And also then, what is the responsibility of the people analytics team itself to help their colleagues in HR to acquire some of these skills?
It's a great follow-up question, because I think sometimes we overlook our own responsibility in helping. So there are two things, building off Ian, what you said. I think there is a palpable anxiety among many of us in HR about taking on that data-driven responsibility, and it's understandable. So people that have not relied on that skill set before, that have not built that skill set before, and have relied very successfully on a different set of skills, asking them to pivot and pivot hard to something different is naturally uncomfortable, and I think we need to be empathetic towards that. So that's probably one blocker, is that we're asking people to move very rapidly to something that might be very unfamiliar, and Heather, to your point, something that they may have very purposefully selected a career not to do. And that's hard. Let's just acknowledge that. The second, I think, very fundamentally, is that we might be asking ourselves as an HR function the wrong question, or we might be framing the way we add value incorrectly. And so, if we think of ourselves at different times as being the provider of information, or saying, my job is to think through what the span of control is, or to provide this information back to my business leader, I think we're framing the way we add value to the business in the wrong way, and we're looking at the value we provide in a very small way compared to what it really is. If we look at the value we provide as helping understand how the business delivers value through our people, so how are we actually executing business strategy through our workforce, and that's the role of HR, and that's the role of the HR business partner, then being data-driven, having that business acumen and data acumen, having the consultant mindset, the change mindset, the talent mindset, those things surface very, very differently. And it's a different conversation, and it's a different way of approaching HR. So those are the two barriers, I would say, David, to your question. What role do we play? Well, I think people analytics can play a very powerful role in addressing both of those barriers. So first off, the very real barrier of anxiety and fear, well, let's help take that away. Right? So that can be done certainly by helping carry some of the burden, but not all of it. So people analytics functions exist to do some of the work. It can exist to help lift the developmental burden as well. So you mentioned communities of practice that I've had the pleasure of developing in some other organizations. How do we help the rest of the organization understand what a data mindset looks like? What is data-driven HR, which so many organizations, many of which are here, have done so very well. What does that look like? And whether that's training or whether that's simply setting a North Star and a guidepost, we can play a role in that. The other piece is helping really walk through what good looks like from a consultative standpoint. So being side by side with our HR business partners or HR colleagues, and help do that consulting work. And I think that helps reframe the conversation around how do we add value through data in HR.
Thank you, RJ. And Heather, similar, if there's any blockers left. But also, thinking back to your time at GE Digital, obviously you were scaling that organization quite quickly. Did you actually start to hire for some of these skills in the general HR population to support the growth?
Yeah, so it's funny because I'm sitting in a room where if I look to my left, I can actually see where, sometimes you go into people analytics and you're sort of on your own and you're trying pretty hard to bring others along. But then if you can bring in individuals, so there's a gentleman named Chris, raise your hand, please. So Chris is here today, now a, full card-carrying member of the people analytics community, in my opinion. But he was really part of another team who saw the power and had the interest and the energy to want to be part of the power of people analytics. And so then individuals like others sitting at the table with me, Sal, we were able to build a talent approach using analytics, and then bring others into that journey and let them be part of it. And then I would say that, Chris actually had better numbers than we did on some of our own initiatives that we were running out. And that's because it's about really bringing other people in, allowing them to be part of the community. And to the comment about barriers of what we can all do, I think we're all pretty awesome in the people analytics community, but sometimes we treat it as if it's its own thing, and that can be a little bit too exclusionary to others, when really we should be welcoming in the broader all to be part of utilizing analytics, whether they might be calling themselves a people analytics professional or not. And I think that can go really far in helping the HR skills come up. And that applies to things like technology and other areas, is really being inclusive as to who we include in that along with us.
So staying with you, Heather, so sort of moved now to how people learn and what people can learn. So looking at the courses that you run at Berkeley, what are sort of some of the skills that you're training or helping people to develop?
Yeah, so some training. In fact, I actually was just working on one with myHRfuture in the academy. I'm gonna say two things that disagree with each other. So one, most of the time, I'm trying to train people not to be data scientists or even really advanced people analysts. I'm trying to teach them how to think like a data-minded person. If you have more advanced skills, fantastic. But if you don't, that doesn't mean you can't leverage them, you can't use tools in other people. And then in the exact same breath, I will also highly recommend that anyone in the HR function, whether people analytics or not, you should be growing some of the more basic data skills. Like, I genuinely believe, and this is where my HRfuture Academy comes in, every HR person who needs to be data-minded should know basic statistics. Do you need to be able to calculate everything? No, but when somebody else brings you analysis, don't you want to be able to critically evaluate it, so you don't just have to accept their word as to whether it's right? You can actually check it out and test it. So I think people need to learn, and the reason I bring those up is you do learn by hands-on. So you do need to play with something like stats, so that then when you get there, you've had some hands-on learning to actually get there and do it.
Thanks. And Ian, obviously the way people learn is changing, and I know that was part of the research that you did as well. There you can learn stuff in a classroom, which is great, but you can also learn on a more continuous basis as well. So it'd be interesting, your viewpoint on the different ways that people want to learn nowadays.
Yeah, and we wanted to understand that better with the research, and I'm a huge fan of continuous learning. I feel like that's kind of how I learn. We're all learning here today. You're learning when you're scrolling your Twitter feed. You're learning by listening to your exceptional podcast. You're learning by doing many of these things. And so I think that's exactly how we do learn, right? I think sometimes we need an intense burst of learning, and that might be classroom-based. It might be a formal, university certificate kind of thing. It could be a short video. It could be a long video. It could be any of these different things. And then ultimately we learn on the job, right? We put that information that we acquire into practice, and then maybe we can read a great article that gives us some more depth, a case study on how a company has also gone and done that, and then we have a conversation with a peer and we pick up on that. And so I think this just fact that we're just gonna have to be learning from now on forever and acquiring new skills is just the new reality. And how we do that is very different, for each individual. But what we learned from the research was just how complex that has become, and how people are learning from blogs, from social media, from YouTube, from all these different sources. And that's something that I think is just going to be more and more the norm now, that we just learn in so many different ways. And if we can, we should learn a little something every single day.
And of course, technology is supporting that as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, it doesn't really matter kind of what your preference is. You're just getting bombarded with that information now. And so it's how do you find really the best sources of that information for you and acquire that in that way. And technology is a huge enabler for that. And obviously, many of the different platforms that are out there to support that now that companies are rolling out is helping with that too. Yeah.
So RJ, following on from that, with your colleagues that you're working with at Uber in the learning department, what sort of challenges is this giving them in terms of actually putting learning, and you could refer to obviously Chevron and McKesson as well, what sort of challenges is this given around HR for HR learning?
So I think there are several that we probably all share as a community. The challenges of speed and scale seem to be fairly common, of providing the right learning kind of at speed, when people need it. So that's where topics of micro-learning come up, of not having, not that there's not a place for courses. There certainly are. I've got to be careful. But balancing the great kind of learning that can happen in a classroom environment with peers, with just-in-time learning that might be, I need to know this now and I need it in 2 minutes. Providing that quickly, but also providing it at scale, right? So across a 1,000, 10,000, 50,000 person organization. So that's certainly one type of challenge. Curating that, so understanding kind of what type of learning at what moment for whom, and that audiences are different. So, and that's where people analytics can play a great role, along with our learning and development departments, of understanding who are our employee segments, what's the difference in their needs. So EX plays a huge role in this, along with people analytics and learning and development, to provide that, for lack of a better term, that Netflix queue of learning and development that I think you may have heard about, or others talk about as well. So those are, I think, some of the barriers from an L&D side.
Okay, I'm going to open it up. So if people got questions, start putting their hands up. I was going to ask a very quick fire question to each of you. You've talked about how HR can learn, but I'm going to talk about it for you guys. So starting with you, Heather, what's the one skill that you'd like to learn this year?
I want to really increase my storytelling and data visualization skills to get the impact of what I find out there.
Well, I saw you present yesterday and your storytelling was perfect.
Thank you, I've been working on it.
Ian?
Yeah, so I'm still obsessed with this whole memory science topic that we explored in your podcast a couple of weeks ago. So yeah, just how the brain works, I'm finding fascinating at the moment. So yeah.
And RJ?
Change management. So I think that a majority of people in analytics ends up boiling down to change management one way or another, and formal approaches to that.
Perfect. You talked a little bit about the personalization of learning. Are we seeing this, and Heather, probably for you actually, so obviously you're doing a course, and it's a bit of both really, isn't it? It's great to go in a classroom because you've got that time and that space to learn as well, but almost you've seen some augmentation with some of the stuff that Ian was talking about perhaps.
Yeah, and I think actually Ian and I have talked about this before. I mean, I love just in time. I love, content that's just on your phone and ready. But I do fundamentally believe in some basics, and some certain topics do need a formal learning process, because I don't think you're going to do just in time like basic statistics so that you can go question something that was given to you. That's something that you need to take a little time out of your put some time to develop, so that when it does come up, you can understand what you're being presented with. And I think the analogy I've used or example I've used in other times is, I am scared of the concept of somebody learning about data privacy just in time. Like, that is a scary thought. Please take some time to understand the notions of data privacy and data governance. So there is a place for formal learning so that you can learn it deep, you can learn it well. And then I really think the other, more just in time, the bite size, that's where I think you'll find the really engaged, personalized, right amount at your right level at the right time that you're interested in. And that sometimes can even go further because it's so applicable to what you're caring about. So I am a fan of both kind of learning areas.
That's brilliantly put. You can almost look at this in 3 buckets, and there are a million other ways to look at this too, but this is what struck me in the moment, that there's structured learning, right? So that's whether it's key learning, cultural, compliance. There are things that we want to build into a learning curriculum. There's just in time, which might be more tactical. So I need to do this for this particular job I'm doing. And then there's nudging, right? Which might be more moment-based or event-based. I haven't done somebody may not have done a one-on-one in a month with one of their directs, and they get a nudge, it's time to do a one-on-one, and here's how to do a great one-on-one. And so if you combine those 3 buckets together, all of which are going to be data informed in different ways. The structural learning, that's going to be really informed by what is our culture, where do we want it to go, what kinds of leaders do we want to develop, what are our talent segments, all those things. The tactical, again, data informed in a different way, and then the nudging, data informed perhaps by passive data collection in a very different way, all those together form a really compelling L&D program. David, there's a question back here.
Yes, please.
Yeah, one thing I'm kind of curious is, I'm kind of in a situation where I'm in an organization that has so many people talented in the analytics, data science space. And I'm trying to figure out how I can get some of these people interested in people analytics. So I'm kind of curious if, any thoughts around that, because this is such an emerging area, but I think to a lot of people that are in the data science analytics space, this is not one of the top things that they necessarily look at all the time. So.
Yeah, I'll jump in there. I think that and this is what actually kind of gets me on this topic area, people are one of the least understood data sets on the planet. I mean, there's like the depths of the ocean and humans. Those are the things we don't really get. And so for a data scientist who is typically, really excited and passionate to solve really hard problems, that is the piece for them, is like, look, physics is physics. There's a right answer. You're going to get to it eventually, and everybody else is going to get to it too. You want to really leave your mark on the world? Come study and measure something that people haven't even yet figured out how to measure and study. And that's a challenge. It's an exciting challenge. I hope all of you appreciate that about what you're doing. You're helping us understand one of the least understood things about just people and people at work in the universe. And so hopefully that can motivate a few of your smart friends to want to come on Team People Analytics.
Hi. So my question, I am a brand new IO PhD graduate. I just started my first job. I love people analytics. It's interesting hearing, I get this all the time, that the soft skills really matter. Like, I'm really strong technically, did the PhD thing, I'm ready to do that. But my question is, like, how do I get better at all those soft skill, cross-functional collaboration, relationship building, other than just doing it? Like, is there anything I can do to like make it go faster, to improve more rapidly, that sort of thing? Because it seems like that really matters.
Who wants to take that one?
I was like, Ian and I are trying to give it to RJ, but he's not picking it up.
I'll take it. So, it's interesting when you look at, say, that we were talking about the LinkedIn skills inventory, I think earlier yesterday, and you brought that up, that those soft skills are the most in demand. So the influencing skills, the emotional intelligence skills. And one of the reasons, in my opinion, besides the fact that it makes for a good team, is that it gets you to product or deliverable faster, right? So one of the things that there are certainly great courses, and we're talking about courses in online learning. I think participating in cross-functional projects and teams. So jump right in. Jump into as many of those projects as you can, and seek out a mentor. So in whatever organization you're in, try to find a mentor that you see does this really well, and have check-ins, and be very transparent and honest with them. Like, I was in this situation, this happened, I thought I got this reaction. What do you think? Because it's by doing reps that you're going to find things out. I'll give you a personal example, because to bring this home a little bit. Early in my career, I was working for a great company that some alumni here in the room worked for as well. And most of my role was kind of doing research and then communicating that research out to executives who were much more established and more senior than me. And one of the toughest things in that job was getting kind of pushback or criticism on the research, because it's me in front of a room of senior executives or board of directors, and it's just me and the research talking, right? And when hard questions come up or the research gets criticized, I'd feel like I'm getting criticized. And the best piece of feedback I got from one of the people on the team was, hey, you got to remember they're having questions about the research. They don't know who you are. They're not criticizing you. And it's very helpful to have that kind of feedback to come from a peer. So I very much recommend getting a mentor, having someone that can help you look at things objectively, and being able to kind of take a step back, and that, I think, will do wonders in this role.
Great answer. Anything to add? Heather or you?
Just a tiny thing to add, which is there are core principles around this that obviously you can learn, you can pick those up, but just to emphasize the benefit of a coach to then reinforce those, to kind of check in on, I'm thinking about approaching it this way, do you have other thoughts? I just think every situation is so nuanced and different, and so learning that framework and that structure is imperative, but then the coaching aspect of that I just think is critical too. Yeah.
Great. I think, Al, you had a question.
Yes, but I'm so hesitant to ask it because we'd be here for another 2 hours, which nobody wants. But I'll ask the abbreviated version. And I want to echo what you just talked about, practice. You know, if you want to get good at this work, whether it be a soft skill or actually, doing math and doing analytics, like anything, it takes practice and reps. So, getting some objective, whether it be a mentor or, peer coaching, which is emerging as I don't want to call it leading practice, but I think a higher value, more accessible way to get visibility into your own behavior or skill set. I think that, I just celebrate that. But to the panel, real quick, if we are perpetually learning, which we are, and if I'm an HR business partner and I'm rooted in this, way of being, inherent in that is I have to be open to disrupting where I have been historically. So as we ourselves have to be open to certain disruptions so we can in fact learn new things. So number one, do you agree with the fact that we have to kind of sometimes get out of our legacy mindset, our legacy thinking, and be open to doing things differently certainly if we expect others to do things differently? Can you comment on that if you mind?
Yeah, well, I'll jump in that and I'll tie it directly to the title. I mean, when we talk about sort of HR skills of the future, yes, I agree. There is a disruption that is going to happen. We are going to be doing things differently because of technology, because of access to data, because of the expectations of employees and businesses. But most people in this field and area are here because they care about people. They care about making a difference. They care about being part of something bigger with an outcome. And what I really think are some of the most important skills of the future is the uniquely human skills get more and more important. And what people don't realize is, yes, there'll be a disruption. Yes, the way we expect to work will change. But on the positive side, just understanding and welcoming this world of technology and analytics will actually enable you to do the part that you wanted to do and do it better and do more of it. You can start really utilizing it to help you be more empathetic, to help you really put the human into it. I mean, it was called human resources because of the human part. And I really do believe that technology and the changes and the disruption that's coming will enable more uniquely human applications. And so I think that's a disruption, but I think that when people realize what that disruption would lead to, they would find it more positive in the end.
I completely agree. We need to be willing to, and I think most of us are, but we need to be willing to disrupt ourselves. And especially as a people analytics community, be willing to make principled bets, knowing that some of them are really going to pay off. But when we fail, be persistent. Yeah. So learn from that failure, make another bet, and keep going. I think sometimes when we talk about, let's say, HR transformation as a function, we have an expectation that, okay, we're going to do an HR transformation and it's going to last 18 months or 5 years or however long it's taken for some of our organizations, and then it's going to be over. And I think the reality that we need to understand and embrace is that HR transformations or transformations in general, they just don't end. It's not a project that's going to last for 12 months or 36 months and then be over and you've got your stable HR organization again. I think that's over. Yeah. That you just go into your next cycle of transformation. And the more we can accept that and communicate that to the rest of our organizations, the better off we'll be.
Yeah. Yeah, and just to add to that quickly, I just think that growth mindset is obviously so important. But when we look at these areas that we're all deeply involved in and what that HR transformation looks like, we're just scratching the surface. There's so far still to go, and it's moving so fast. And I just think it's going to keep changing and keep changing. So being open to that change and exploring that's the most exciting thing, is there's so much more to learn, and that surely is what is motivating most of us in this space.
Absolutely. You want to bring us home?
Well, I think we've run out of time, unfortunately. So it's been a fantastic panel, and I think we probably all agree that upskilling HR is an important part of creating sustainable capability with people analytics and having a more data-driven function. So RJ, Heather, Ian, thank you very much.
Well done. Well done.